Hello, my name is Chad Brand. I guess you probably know that since you clicked on the link on my Facebook or Twitter page here. And probably many of you who've clicked on that already know me, and some of you may be even former students or colleagues of mine. Uh, I prepared this video because I want to offer to you and your church or your organization or your Christian school an opportunity. This year is a special year in that it marks the 500th anniversary of the beginnings of the Protestant Reformation. Many of you would know this already. October 31st, 1517, the German monk Bible professor Martin Luther nailed a document called the 95 Theses up onto the door of the castle church in the town of Wittenberg, where he was a Bible professor. That initiated a series of events and debates and confrontations that eventually spread around northern Germany and beyond that into the Swiss cantons, into England, into Holland, into Scandinavia, other parts of Europe as well, eventually to America, that we know of as Protestantism or the Protestant Reformation or Reformation theology. And since this is the 500th anniversary, it's kind of a special deal. I've been noticing churches around the country that have already had Reformation celebrations. I've been invited by a number of churches to come to their church and speak to their people about the Protestant Reformation. And so with those invitations in mind, I've actually had more than I expected to. I decided that I would offer this opportunity to some of you. And if you and your church would be interested, I'd be happy to come. Let me say something about myself in case you don't know me. I spent the last 25 years as a professor at accredited Christian college and seminaries, teaching Bible, theology, church history, Baptist history, apologetics, philosophy of religion, and things like that. But my PhD is in systematic theology, and my primary focus of teaching throughout the years has been systematic theology, church history, and historical theology. In fact, for the last 21 of the 25 years, nearly every semester, I had incorporated into some class or classes that I was teaching some material that dealt with the Protestant Reformation. It's been a subject of research for me for a long time. I've read hundreds of books, some on Reformation theology, some biographies of the Reformers, some on the history of the Reformation or one aspect of it or other. And so it's something that has been special to me and a treasure in my heart for a long time, for many decades. Now, I believe that this kind of study, not only is it timely because of the anniversary, but I think it's also timely because it's needed. We live in a world where Western culture has been departing from the Christian faith now for the last 100 years, in some ways even longer. And there's a great threat. There's a great threat at the educational institutions that some of you have attended or will attend, or even more importantly, that your children and grandchildren will attend. And I'm speaking especially here of state universities and colleges and a lot of the private secular colleges that are in the United States, because many of the faculties in the liberal arts areas of those schools are Marxists, they are secularists, they are atheists, some variety of the above, deconstructionists. And so I've had the heartbreaking experience of having many mother or grandmother or father come to me over the years in my pastoral ministry. I've been a full-time pastor, and during the last 25 years I've held 13 interim pastorates as well, coming and saying, I sent my child off to college. She was the leader of the youth group here at our church when she was in high school. But within 2 years of being off at the University of fill in the blank, she came home and said she didn't believe in God anymore, or some such scenario as that. And so I think what our people need is to be grounded. Now, you know and I know that people who are faithful to come to church generally are pretty well grounded in the Bible, and that's the most important thing. And I know that many of you pastors have labored very, very hard at making sure that your people know and understand the Bible. But this is something else that they need to know and understand. That is their theological heritage as Christian people, and why it is that we emphasize the kinds of theological beliefs that we emphasize as evangelicals in the evangelical wing of Christianity, whatever variety of it that your church may belong to. I think this is important, and this is something that's burned in my heart for a long time. I've spent the last couple of years doing conferences at churches on apologetics, and I can tell you it's needed out there. Now, I know that pastors oftentimes wish that they could do something like this, and many of you have probably thought about it. Some of you likely have done it. But I've been a full-time pastor, and I know how busy a pastor's schedule can be. And so between preaching and teaching 3 or 4 times a week or more, committee meetings, deacon meetings, pastoral visitation, prospect visitation, the administration of the church, meeting with staffs, and doing all of those things, most of you just really won't have time to invest in sort of preparing yourself to present material like this and doing it as well as you'd like to. Well, that's where a guy like me comes in. I love teaching lay people. I love teaching lay people more than I love teaching PhDs. Well, maybe I should back that down. More even than I love teaching college. And I've had a lot of good experiences in going out to churches during my years as a college and seminary professor. And of the 25 years that I have been teaching, 15 years were spent at one school, one of our seminaries, where I was professor of theology. So it's something that's in my lifeblood. I was teaching theology to lay people before I ever went to get a PhD or was ever hired to teach at a college or a seminary. And so I just want to make aware to you that I would love to come and spend a few days with your people. Now, here's the sort of thing that the churches I've been talking to have been interested in. There are several key individuals who were very much a part of the core of the Reformation movement. Martin Luther, Ulrich Zwingli, easy for you to say, John Calvin, Menno Simons, Thomas Cranmer. We could list others, but those are the better known names. And those are interesting people. They're interesting, their lives are interesting, their work was interesting. And so what I normally do with something like this is I would come out and we would set up a session or 2 or 3 or 4, whatever you've deemed appropriate, and we would focus on some of those individuals. Now, I teach church history. I love to teach church history. A lot of people don't like history. And I've had students over the years who would come and say, they're enrolling in the school, and they would ask, what kind of courses do I need to take? And I'd say, well, here's a list, and they'd say, history. Oh my goodness, because for them, history is geography and dates. For me, history is not geography and dates. For me, history is people. And I like to say to folks, in fact, I would say this at the beginning of every semester teaching church history. One thing you'll find out about me is that dates are not that important. A few are, but we're going to talk about, over the course of 2 semesters, about 80 important people. And that's because I'm a people person, as long as they're dead, since almost everybody I would teach about in church history was already dead. But I think that people in churches learn from people. And so what I normally do is spend a little time on biography, just to position this person. Was he from Germany or Switzerland or England or whatever? And then focus on the important theological contributions and the important contributions to practical ministry that this person contributed, and how that's impacted and affected the church over time. So we think about a Martin Luther, translated the Bible into German, had it published, first published German translation. That translation's been used for 400 years and more since Luther, and very, very influential. Rediscovered the doctrine of justification by faith alone. Emphasized the importance of sola scriptura, that is, the Bible alone is our authority, and not the church as our authority, or the Pope, or the councils, or the traditions of the church, that we get our authority from Scripture. Martin Luther had sort of founded the first Protestant seminary and other major contributions, and so he's a very interesting guy. His life is interesting. Ulrich Zwingli, not as well known, but Zwingli was the first Swiss reformer, and Zwingli taught his students at the university, and practiced this in the church he pastored, that you need to read the Bible in the original languages if you're going to be a minister. And Zwingli himself had memorized the entire Greek New Testament by the time that he was 30. Zwingli also, and this kind of strikes a little closer to home for us in the Free Church or Baptist tradition, Zwingli carved out a way of understanding the Lord's Supper that was not Catholic and that was not Lutheran, but is an understanding that has been adopted by many in the Baptistic with a little b Free Church traditions, and even those in Pentecostal circles. So Zwingli, Calvin, controversial figure, but many of the things that Calvin did and accomplished are really not controversial. They're part of the common heritage that we share in the church. He wrote a very important theology book that Arnold Toynbee said was the one of the 10 books that shook the Western world. Wrote commentaries on every book of the Bible, nearly. He articulated the doctrine of the perseverance of the saints in ways that nobody before him had done. And again, he was a leader in the Swiss Reform movement in Geneva. Menno Simons, one of the so-called Anabaptists. Menno Simons, you might surmise from his name, would be named the founder of the Mennonite movement, the Free Church movement of his time. And so those reforms that were enacted by him and like-minded people, sometimes called the radical reformers, had some great impact. I'll just mention two. One, Menno Simons believed that the church and the state should be separate entities. The state should govern state issues and the church should govern church issues, and they shouldn't collude together. Menno Simons, as you would know, probably also articulated the doctrine of disciples' baptism or believers' baptism as opposed to infant baptism. And of course, those heritages were picked up a few decades later by the Baptist movement. Thomas Cranmer, not quite as well known or friendly feeling to us. Cranmer helped the Anglican Church break away from Roman Catholicism. He worked with King Henry VIII to do that, and then was the key figure in the gradual Protestantizing of the Anglican Church over the years of Henry's rule and the rule of Henry's son, Edward VI. So, important figures. Now, I want to wrap this up. I don't want to take any more of your time. If you're interested, or even potentially interested, in having me come out to your church or organization and do some teaching on this, my email address is chadbrand@aol.com. And on the Facebook page and the Twitter page, I'll give you some more contact information. Contact me anytime. We can do it anytime in the months ahead. I love teaching lay people, as I emphasized a while ago. I appreciate you giving me 14 minutes of your time here today, and